Now that the final tracks of the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass have been released, we have got a whopping 96 tracks in this game. Even with this colossal amount of tracks, the fans will still find something to complain about. Am I one of those fans? Maybe a little bit. I remember expressing a great big, when I saw that these DLC courses would include tracks based on real cities rather than places in the Mushroom Kingdom. When I actually played these tracks, I found them to be pretty fun and well designed, but they still suffered from the expected blandness of existing within the real world. Here's the fundamental issue with these city tracks. The main appeal of Mario Kart is that it is a racing game that takes place in the Mario universe. City tracks are literally the embodiment of tracks that don't take place in the Mario universe. They take place in real-world cities. Mario has always been kind of all over the place in terms of whether or not he exists in the real world. Sometimes he's from Brooklyn, sometimes the Mushroom Kingdom is some alternate dimension that you go to when you fall down the drain, sometimes he's in space, sometimes he's at the Olympics with Sonic. What I'm trying to say is that Mario is not as out of place in a quote-unquote real world as a character like, say, Link would be. Oh wait, I guess Link is in the real world here too, because he got invited to Mario Kart, and he can race in all these cities too. This is mostly a Mario game. Link is just a guest. When the city courses were first announced, my initial accusation towards Nintendo was that these were ways of lowering dev time by putting in low-effort tracks. See, these tracks come from Mario Kart Tour, which is the mobile version of Mario Kart. So my initial thought was that Nintendo just took the track layout from Mario Kart Tour and moved it over to the Switch so they wouldn't have to design more tracks. However, I played some of the city tracks on Mario Kart Tour and compared them to their 8 Deluxe counterparts. And while there are some parts of the tracks that are the same, they really aren't all that similar. After doing a little more research, apparently a lot of these tracks are actually combinations of multiple city tracks. Like in Mario Kart Tour, there's a New York Minute 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the New York Minute in 8 Deluxe includes elements from all of those. Tour also did a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of graphical design. A lot of what I see in Tour tracks transferred over to 8 Deluxe and definitely made it a little easier on the dev team. Now, does this mean that my initial accusation of laziness is true? It seems that Nintendo still had to do a lot of designing both graphically and creatively on all these city tracks, even though they came from Tour. They definitely had to do less work on the city tracks than they had to do on, say, Sky Garden, which last appeared on the Nintendo DS. They weren't porting any graphics for that one. I still will say that I'm not going to accuse Nintendo of being lazy when implementing these tracks. It still feels like every track in the booster course is fully designed with the most amount of Nintendo heart there ever could be. Well, every track except Mario Circuit 3, that is. So now let's talk about the gameplay of these city tracks. Gameplay-wise, they are really solid. I wouldn't say that any city track is any worse than any regular non-city track in terms of gameplay. However, they are pretty much always a middle-of-the-road experience. I don't think any of them would crack my top 10 in terms of track design. One thing about city tracks is that they will often shift in between laps. The final lap will sometimes introduce a brand new element. Take, for example, the Madrid course, where on the final lap you drive through this Sorry, my American is showing. This football field. Honestly, this just makes me wish more tracks did this. The only non-city tracks that do this are Peach Gardens and Calamari Desert. And a large amount of the city tracks are 3-part mega tracks. This is probably because the track layouts are an amalgamation of multiple different track layouts from Tour. I really like these, but it's kind of sad that most of the 3-part tracks are just the city tracks. I really think Mario Kart needed more of these massive tracks, and I think it's an underused kind of course. Obstacle-wise, sometimes we get a Mario enemy sprinkled in here and there, like a Thwomp, a Goomba, a Swoopers, or a Chain Chomp. There are very few instances of obstacles that aren't reused from other Mario Kart tracks. I think that speaks to how little you can do when your track is based on a real-world city. There is one Mario enemy that I think worked incredibly well here, and that would be the Womp in Berlin Byway, representing the Berlin Wall. I think that was super clever. Now let's talk about the presentation of these city tracks. Gameplay-wise, they are fine, but gameplay isn't everything. So I think some important context to this discussion is to point out that this is far from the first time Mario Kart had tracks that took place in a regular city. This trend really began all the way back in Mario Kart 64 with Toad's Turnpike. The entire gimmick of Toad's Turnpike was that you raced along a big road and avoided real trucks and cars. I always found it to be a funny novelty that within a game that had Bowser's castles and rainbow roads, one of the tracks was just Hey, what if we just drove on a regular road with cars going by? I would say the city tracks really started to take form in Mario Kart Double Dash's Mushroom Bridge and Mushroom City. When playing these two tracks, I really have to say they are not that different from the Booster Course City tracks. If anything, the Booster Course cities are more interesting in places because they are referencing real cities and show off those real-life landmarks. Now, why are there complaints about Booster Course Pass City tracks, but few complaints about Mushroom Bridge and Mushroom City? I think a major difference lies in the Booster Course Pass City tracks being featured in DLC, and people feel they are actively taking away from Nintendo including other pass courses they may have liked, like Toad's Factory or Delfino Square. That is really the heart of the issue. These tracks feel kind of like vegetables, and Nintendo is making us eat them. But come on, we all want the cookies. There's a reason that these courses are all the first track of each Grand Prix. You've pretty much got to play them in order to play the other ones. It'll be one thing if Nintendo released the city tracks as the Mario Kart Tour Pass and charged a separate fee for them, but I know why Nintendo didn't do that. It's because no one would have bought it. The only way for Nintendo to get you to play these courses was to put them in with the nostalgic tracks that you've been waiting for. Nintendo succeeded in making me eat the vegetables. And you know what? I kinda like them. These tracks aren't bad. They have good music, good course design, and they can teach you a little bit about real-world cities. I do wish there weren't 14 of them. That's 29% of the new tracks, nearly 1/3. I felt particularly robbed on waves 4 and 5 when there were 3 city tracks introduced instead of the usual 2. I also think they could have implemented the Mario enemies and obstacles a little better. Like, instead of random Goombas waddling around Central Park, why not have a street-performing hammer bro juggling flaming hammers? The Mario Kart Booster Course Pass was great, and I enjoyed the past year and a half of anticipating and playing new courses. The city tracks did not ruin my experience, but they also weren't exactly a highlight either. They provide consistent and enjoyable races, but lose out on the magic of the Mushroom Kingdom, and I think that is their biggest flaw. And those are my thoughts. What did you think of the city courses? Did they ruin the game for you? Are they your favorite? How many of these cities have you been to in the real world? If you like what I do and want to see me do more of it, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps with the algorithm recommending my content. Also, head on over to Game Cubicle Live to see highlights of my live streams. And if you're feeling particularly moved by what I've crafted for you today, consider subscribing to my Patreon for as low as $1 a month. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.